Hi, my name is Tanya Martin. I'm an RO-DBT practitioner. I've been working in this area for a couple of years, really getting to know a lot about RO-DBT as well as the core components that underlie that. I'm here representing RO-DBT Australia. It's because I'm trying to get the word out there, have people understand a lot more about this treatment modality and how it can be helpful. So today I wanted to focus on one of the core concepts underlying RO-DBT. So this was developed as a transdiagnostic treatment, so not for one particular disorder such as depression, anxiety, anorexia, but it's developed to treat a general overall area of maladaptive overcontrol. But what does this even mean? So to understand this, it's useful to understand the differences between overcontrol and undercontrol. First, let's talk overcontrol. So these individuals, both as children and as adults, can be described as dramatic, impulsive, disobedient, erratic, chaotic, and able to delay gratification. From more of a behaviour trait point of view, these clients are high reward sensitivity, low inhibitory control, high threat sensitivity. So this generally means that they experience pleasure quite easily, so there's that high reward sensitivity, or more sensitive to receiving rewards, which is great. Low inhibitory control, so unable to, I suppose, stop themselves and have an urge, as well as that high threat sensitivity and high emotional sensitivity, moreover. Generally, they have poor impulse control. They can be very emotionally expressive and quite often dramatic and disorganized. That lack of self-control is really linked to a lot of problem behaviours in society, like substance abuse, criminal behaviour, violence, financial issues, etc. It's generally really eye-catching. It's really obvious to others. There's low persistence, perseverance, low perfectionism, low rigidity, low obsessiveness, whereas it's high in impulsivity, sensation-seeking, novelty-seeking. So this sort of summarises disorders such as borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, as well as substance abuse, criminal activity, binge eating, bulimia, etc. So generally things that are characterised by what we call big signals for help. So these are the people who are more likely to drain our services in hospitals or treatment providers, very much seeking help, openly seeking help. So this behaviour communicates to other people in society, generally our tribe, that we need help. And because these signals are quite big, quite distressing, we oblige naturally. On the other hand, we have our individuals characterised by overcontrol. These people are generally more cautious and reserved. Perhaps they were quite shy as a child. They tend to control their emotions and tend to be organised, structured and conscientious. Sometimes too much so. For example, they might find it difficult to relax. So in regards to those traits, generally low reward sensitivity, high threat sensitivity and high inhibitory control. So what that means is that these people are less likely to experience reward in their environment, less sensitive to when that may happen, as well as being very sensitive to threats in the environment, so likely to see risks around them very easily, as well as high inhibitory control. So very good at delaying impulses and delaying gratification. These people are often quite emotionally constricted, shy, risk-averse, and socially anxious children. And they're more likely to develop internalizing disorders such as anxiety, and become quite socially isolated adults. In general, characterised by high persistence, perseverance, perfectionism, rigidity, and obsessiveness. On the other hand, low novelty-seeking, sensation-seeking, and low impulsivity. So these obviously behaviours are more likely to lead to things like obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, as well as autism spectrum disorders, anorexia nervosa. And these traits are also really present in a number of really chronically depressed and anxious people who have been struggling to get help in other areas. So these are really high prevalent disorders. They're really there. They're a lot in our environment, but they're not met with those big signals of the other disorders. somewhat with the exception of anorexia nervosa, where loved ones are really going to notice the low body weight. However, the anorexia patient generally tries to hide this as much as possible. Generally, people with over-control presentations tend to suffer in silence. To go further, some of these presentations are notorious for not asking for help. So these people are really struggling, but they are at the same time not seeking help as much, which is why there hasn't been as much focus on these people in the general treatment literature. So in order to understand the over-control, under-control thing a little bit more, it's important to keep in mind that this is actually a spectrum. These are not two completely different categories with psychologically healthy people somewhere else. Theoretically, everyone in the world is going to fall somewhere on the over-control, under-control spectrum. This is based on our biotemperament and the genetics we're born with, basically. We are biologically predisposed to lean towards over-control or under-control. For example, I believe that I was born leaning towards under-control. I've always liked to be the center of attention. I tend to jump in headfirst into things before thinking about the risks, and I tend to overload myself with things that I like and enjoy without thinking about how I'm actually going to fit them all in. And this has been really obvious since childhood. To add to this, I find that I have a really high reward sensitivity. I tend to enjoy doing lots of things and find rewards really easily in things. This is fantastic. I've always said you can throw me into anything and I'll love it. It's easy to be happy. I have a lot of fun. I can take risks and I learn a lot of new things. Even, I suppose, the most recent example in doing this presentation. Slapped a couple of notes together we'll record it, see how we go. If worst comes to worst, I'll do it again. So it's this real under control kind of trait that tends to go through and has always been there. However, I've really noticed that over time I've started to move closer to the over control side of the spectrum. Why? Because this is effective in society. If I want to play instruments, sing, dance, play sport and not fail at school, I have to learn how to organise. There's not enough hours in a day to be able to fit that all in chaotically. I have to learn how to plan. And this is really evident in school, where I wanted to do every single extracurricular activity because I liked it all, but kept not showing up, forgetting about things, being really late, getting distracted by, what was happening, at school during lunch or recess, and forgetting that I had a meeting to be somewhere. So consequences were there. I had to learn from those consequences, and as a result, learned how to plan, learned how to be organised. And I received a lot of reinforcement when I was organised. I didn't get punishment. I instead got rewards for that. That was great. So I got reinforcement for doing things right, being organised, being conscientious, and putting effort in. If I wanted to do well in my education, because, I had dreams and stuff, I had to work hard. I had to try. I had to put in the time. So there was a lot of reinforcement for that. And that was not only in my schooling, it was in my friends, my family, my society. And I suppose I mentioned friends socially. My friends aren't going to like it if I don't show up. So again, this is there in every aspect of my life, starting to push me towards being a lot more over control, which I suppose has been quite useful. So I am very proud of my under control. I'm also really happy that I have really taken on board a lot of those under control traits. Otherwise, I would not be successfully functioning in our society, let's face it. I tend to get excited easily. Professionally, I've really had to deal with this constant battle to keep this under wraps. So what I'm saying basically is over control is not actually a problem in itself. It's a necessity. We do need people who are over control in order to build bridges, buildings, keep law and order. Without over control, we just wouldn't have a functioning society. As much as it's a dirty word, stubbornness is incredible. The people I come across who are stubborn and stick to their guns get stuff done, and it works. So stubbornness and perfectionism are great traits that can lead to incredible success. On the other hand, unfortunately, sometimes you can have a little bit too much of a good thing. Simply put, this is where people with a tendency to lean towards over control come from an environment that reinforces that self-control. For an example, an over-control person may grow up in a family or a culture or in a social environment that values self-control and not making a mistake. This young person is likely to learn that mistakes are intolerable and that it's absolutely necessary to strongly avoid ever showing weakness or vulnerability. Behaviour that may be reinforced or rewarded, maybe doing really well in school, being the best, appearing perfect, big boys or big girls don't cry, being really conscientious. On the other hand, the behaviours that may be punished in these people, maybe making a mistake, crying during a movie, having general displays of emotion. As a result of this, the person is going to learn how to not take risks, so they're never going to make a mistake. They also may learn to avoid showing any vulnerability, even when they're distressed, to avoid appearing out of control, or by masking feelings and keeping a poker face. As I said earlier, this is likely to be a really good thing in some situations and met with a lot of praise and success. And it's also likely to be continually reinforced through someone's childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. And as a result, this is going to increase the behaviour. It's important to keep in mind over-control traits do tend to increase over time through that ongoing reinforcement, whereas under-control traits tend to decrease over time because, again, reinforcement from our environment. Where this becomes maladaptive is when these learned behaviours become rigid rules, like always having to be the best at school or showing any emotions is bad. Doing well can be stressful and can really erode a person's ability to relax, have fun, and be playful. A person who theoretically has low reward sensitivity to start with is taught not to seek out things that may be pleasurable because that is punished. Instead, success or doing well or generally doing well is what gets them to feel good. Unfortunately, these things are really, really hard to consistently attain, and this can lead to a person feeling really depressed. It's hard not to be depressed when you don't have anything that makes you feel good. In addition, humans do need to show emotions in order to connect with others. Before we had language, before we were able to talk, we had emotions. We generally like people and perceive them as more trustworthy when they're more open and vulnerable with us. As a result, being quite closed off to others and keeping people at arm's length is going to protect us from vulnerability and possible perceived ridicule, but it also may lead to us being more miserable. But this is something that I'll talk about at another time. In general, everyone leans either towards being over control or under control, and our environment provides us with the reinforcement of these behaviours. Sometimes this can lead to very adaptive development for a person. However, unfortunately, sometimes it can lead to either maladaptive, over control, or under control presentations. The purpose of this clip was to introduce both of these sides of the spectrum and to highlight the pros and cons of both. We need our over-control people to build buildings, bridges, roads, and generally keep society running. I love my over-control colleagues because they clean the building and they make sure everything is in order. But we need us lovely under-control people to have fun, be creative, and take some risks. Someone needs to come up with the ideas for all the buildings and bridges and then possibly pass it on to someone who's actually going to execute their project a little bit more effectively. Basically, we need both to work together, but we also need to learn how to be flexible between the two, rather than polarizing and say we need this over-control person to work with this under-control person. In a perfect world, we'll learn how to have both and to know when there's too much of a good thing. So RO-DBT is designed to help people with maladaptive overcontrol, help them to have fun, play, and enhance their relationships through showing vulnerability and being flexible, and therefore reduce low mood and the rigidity that keeps people stuck. As I like to say, it really helps people to learn to use our powers for good and not evil. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I look forward to talking with you soon.